As y'all may know, Donald Trump has signed a lot of executive orders that are allowing the layoff of a lot of federal employees. Just kind of want to start off by saying I pulled a muscle, so if y'all see me tripping, it's because it still hurts. But as you know, he's also letting Elon Musk, which is this fake department of government efficiency, DOGE. It's not really a back department. Um, so in theory, I would agree with DOGE. I'm just don't agree with the world's richest man doing DOGE. But I did kind of want to talk about the pros and cons, laying off a lot of these federal workers. I have some videos that I want to show y'all, but I kind of wanted to go over the statistics of what's kind of going on and why we should all be concerned. Um, so, the Ludwig Institute for Shared Economic Prosperity um, details that the real rate of unemployment is 2.3%. And of course, we always get this low rate that's roughly around 3.8%, 4%, sometimes on the high end at 4.5%. And then that's usually classified as a low unemployment rate. But these numbers that we get that are in the threes and the fours, these numbers are cooked. If you were to properly calculate the numbers, it's, of course, nearly a quarter of, you know, the working population in America that's unemployed. Rate of unemployment during the Great Depression at is 25%. So, and obviously, we know that I want to say Black Friday or Black Thursday or something like that happened in 1929, and then it's just been elevated ever since. And let's see if we could pull up a bigger picture. Um, so these are the 1929 unemployment rate was fairly low, and then it skyrocketed at its peak to about 25%. And then it stayed pretty elevated all the way to 1942. And so a lot of that was because around that time we entered into the war. So it kind of beefed up manufacturing, and a lot of the soldiers ended up getting GI bills and getting paid for being overseas. Um, So the true rate of unemployment as defined by the Ludwig Institute measures the percentage of the US labor force that is functionally unemployed. Using data compiled by the federal government's Bureau of Labor Statistics, the true rate of unemployment tracks the percentage of the U.S. labor force that does not have a full time job, which is classified as 35 plus hours a week. But once one has no job or does not earn a living wage, conservatively pegged at 25,000 annually before taxes. And we all know that there isn't a single state in the union that you can live off $25,000, which is roughly 2 grand a month. Um, so obviously, this kind of goes back. The numbers were pretty high under um Bill Clinton. Um, they lowered some after the dot com bubble. The dot com bubble was mainly a the main the main that those mainly affected was mainly just the stock market. And of course it peaked going well. Here's when the recession actually kicked in. The stock market tanked in 2008, and then it just went up. It stayed pretty elevated, and then it started getting better um, near the end of Trump's presidency. And of course, it skyrocketed during COVID, and a lot of these jobs came back. And so this is the true rate. So obviously, it's been in the mid to mid 20s to about the mid 30s. So, and I think when was NAFTA signed? When was NAFTA create implemented? 1994. So that would kind of give a big rise to this. And of course, they've cooked the books for so many years. So, they had a 5.4, 5.6. And so, what they don't really tell you about is about the people who are working two or three jobs. So they're not counting that person having multiple jobs. They're just counting those jobs being filled. So, of course, if you're working two or three jobs, they're not counting it in that way. They also are not counting um, those that have completed the unemployment payout. They obviously don't count migrants or undocumented workers in the same way that they do U.S. citizens. So there's a lot of reasons why that this kind of goes on. Um, uh, then also, there's maternity leave. Um, Obviously, those without high school and out skills, obviously have higher unemployment rates. So, obviously, as you get two more bachelor's and advanced degrees, you're least likely to be unemployed. But even that doesn't even really matter these days. So I kind of wanted to review that. So, we're sitting at 23.3%. There's obviously been, let me see if I can pull it up real quick. Recent layoffs. Let's do 2024. As you can see, 10% of its labor force at Boeing, um, Apple, 100 jobs. I mean, it's a lot, but I mean, it's not a lot. CVS didn't really do too much. Intel, Microsoft, Paramount's 15%. Volkswagen laid off thousands of jobs. Wells Fargo, um, and then we can also go back to 2023. There was a lot of massive layoffs. Um, so yeah, in 2023, over 305,000 U.S. workers were laid off in a series of mass layoffs. So, they're not really talking about all these jobs. And it's just, if you, especially if you're in like a um, certain sector like tech. I mean, right now, of course, that y'all know that there's a whole Elon Musk, Steve Bannon debate about H-1B visas. H-1B visas is literally allows them to go overseas, usually India, to go get and replace these U.S. jobs up there. So it's almost hard for these people to be able to find work. And then when you're talking about these people making anywhere between 100, um, uh, like just in the tech alone in 22, there was over 120,000 people. So when you're talking about people who are making 150 to $350,000 as tech workers, um, especially when you're talking about Google, Meta, um, Alphabet, which is Google, Microsoft. A lot of these, obviously, this is when Elon Musk bought Twitter. So, what do you do when, let's just hypothetically say, 500,000 people in the tech industry has been laid off by a lot of the, big name players? Do you go, let's check this out. So obviously, um, yeah, we could easily say, you know, anywhere between 250,000 to 500,000 tech jobs being laid off. How do you replace that kind of income? Let's say you are making $300,000, you got a, let's just say $1 million house. So now let's say your monthly payments are like $8,000 a month. You know, how do you go from that to, a lesser paying job? Even if you take $100,000 pay cut or $150,000 pay cut, it becomes hard to replace that income. And then you're talking about now you're in competition with, 250,000 or 500,000 other US workers who potentially have the same skill set that you do. So it even becomes even much harder. And then a lot of these companies, instead of actually replacing you with another US worker, they're replacing you with somebody from India. So now, how do you even compete to somebody who's even taking a very, very serious pay cut? So that kind of leads me into the Donald Trump thing and the DOGE thing. So let's go to the Hill and so then here you go. So as of February 13th, which was last week, 77,000 employees have accepted the paid time off or the severance package. Obviously, there's issues with that severance package. So, you know, um, Levitt, Carolyn, I don't know why I want to keep calling her Kathy, but Carolyn Levitt, um, obviously they're saying they're saving us hundreds of millions of dollars with this buyout. I mean, that's in a way that's great, but in other ways that's not great because what do you do when you're a waitress in Washington D.C. area or you're in the Maryland area and you're used to having, people, leave you a 5, 10, $20 tip, and then you have several employees, coming in before work, during lunch, after work, happy hour, for dinner. And then those people immediately stop, generating income for you. What do you do if you're like a hairdresser and let's just say, I don't know, three or four of those people are directly tied to the federal government? Then what do you do when, you know, you're a lawn person and that money stops? Let's say you're wanting to get your house remodeled. You just moved to DC, you moved to the DC area, you want to buy an older home so you can be able to save some money and get it remodeled. Well, now that contractor or that those contractors, they're not going to be able to charge what they would normally charge. So you have to take into effect a lot of this. And as of right now, I think it has the potential of being bad. Um, there was, as of right now, today is February 21st, there was, um, a small pullback as of today. I mean, it could lead into something else. I think that it's going to lead in something else. There's a lot of investors sitting on cash, but the SP 500, I follow the SPY, SPY. It had a 1.71% pullback. Um, as of right now, probably let me see, since mid-December. Um, Even though it's trailed higher, we've had low trading volume since May. Low buying volume, even though it's trailed higher. Low trading volume and buying volume all the way from summer to about December. And then around December, it crossed back over, and there's more sellers than there are buyers. So we could easily see, a 5, 10, 25% correction. And if things keep going on, we could see, a bear market. And as you may know, that could trigger a lot. Today, Walmart is the first line of defense. Usually, people stop spending at places like Target and then they go to Walmart. But Walmart had bad guidance for the rest of this year, meaning they don't believe that they're going to see a lot of economic growth. So it took a huge hit for the past, I want to say, 2 days. Um, yeah, it went from 106 to about $94, $95. So it's taken a huge pullback. So when you factor in a lot of this stuff, it could be bad. So kind of going back to the Hill, um, obviously they're going to fire those on probationary period. Those are usually new hires or those who are just recently promoted. So it's not like those that are in trouble. And obviously, federal employees typically remain on a probation period from anywhere between 1 to 2 years after being hired, depending on the agency. So roughly 200,000 federal employees could be affected. Um, da, 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 da. As of last Friday, February 14th, Department of Veterans Affairs, like this part right here, definitely has me very concerned. A lot of veterans already have a hard time getting a job when they're coming back from um, service. So, you've already laid off 1,000 employees. Um, The layoffs will save more than $98 million per year, allow the government to redirect the money toward health care, benefits, and services for VA beneficiaries. Um, there are currently more than 43,000 probationary employees across the department. The vast majority of them who vast majority of them are exempt from today's personnel actions because they serve in mission critical positions, primarily those supporting benefits and services for VA beneficiaries or are covered under a collective bargain agreement. I'm sorry, like I think that just my personal opinion. Instead of paying, $200-300 for a fucking hammer, at the DOD, that money should be, you know, uh, sent to the Department of Veterans Affairs. I don't think that anybody should be fired from the Veteran Affairs, and I actually think that they actually should have more money. We may do a video based on how there's just so much fraud and abuse from coming from out of the DOD and the Pentagon. Um, but they want to cut 8% of the workforce. But a lot of that is just them getting pimped out by contractors. They're, in part, they're cooking food, but when they go out overseas, the people who cook the meals and stuff like that, they're really getting dragged through the mud with those prices. Department of Education. Um, it was only 50 employees then. Uh, I mean, $900 million worth of contracts have been cut from the education department. Um, I mean, that's crazy. This is why she had to rehire some of the employees because the Department of Energy actually has connections to the nukes. So, yeah, they did fire 2,000 employees, but they did allow them to come back. Um, 750 CDC employees have received terminations. 10% of the workforce would be cut, which is about 1,300 employees. At the NIH, 1,000 to 1,200 employees received termination notices over the weekend. Department of Homeland Security is kind of crazy for the simple fact they do control border control, a lot of drugs coming in and out, human trafficking accusations. So I don't really see why that's a great ass idea, especially when you're trying to beef up border security. So I mean, yeah. The IRS. I mean, we all know that Trump and the billionaires don't want to pay taxes. So obviously that's what that's going to be. Um, uh, yeah, 950 employees with the Department of hmm, Health and Human Services, Indian Health Services were told. So, yeah, Uh, I don't really see this being a good thing. Um, Obviously, I do believe cutting the Pentagon budget. We do have to have defense, but when you have several $100 um fucking hammers. I mean, as somebody who, I still do construction a little bit, but even as somebody that does fucking as construction, I mean, like, bro, what are you buying? Stiletto hammers? I mean, you could easily get a high quality DeWalt or Milwaukee hammer, for 30, 40 bucks. I mean, you can easily still get a Cobalt. It's a fucking hammer, dude. Like, uh, obviously, this is CNNBC. As you can see, it's kind of skyrocketed. So this is just the unemployment claims. They are not part of the state claims because they're federal employees. So they actually have their own unemployment services. So as of right now, it's about 1,700. Um, yeah, the unemployment compensation for federal employees. So they actually have their own. But I mean, it's good that they actually have their own unemployment system. But I mean, like here in North Carolina, you're not going to make no more than $300 a week, and that doesn't matter what kind of job that you have. And I think there's another handful of states that are just shitty, such as North Carolina. Um, but yeah, so we're gonna take a look at this guy. He actually voted for Trump, worked at the IRS, and just to kind of get to see what he was talking about. What happened today?
So, I mean, I went in at my normal time. When I arrived there, everybody was in a very downtrodden mood. Um, and when I went to my computer, everybody was having some technical issues. Like none of our computers were really loading up either the programs that we needed to operate or like Teams. My story is the Teams. That's kind of how I figured out that we were getting fired today. Was when I went in, I logged into Teams and I sent you the photo of what I saw when I went to log in, and that's when I left my cubicle and I went around to everybody else I work with. And I'm like, hey, what's your teams look like? Some were having trouble, some were able to log in. It was very, very chaotic. I mean, there was no organization to it at all. And basically, we just sat around for the rest of the day. I mean, talk about government efficiency. We literally sat there and did nothing all day long while we waited for our fate. So again, we got our email saying that we were fired after sitting around all day knowing we were fired. Um, and then we turned in our equipment about an hour or so later, and then we were escorted out of the building.
What do you make of what happened to you and your colleagues today? We hear about 400 employees, including yourself, were laid off.
I mean, it's unfair. I mean, I was unemployed, so I was laid off. I was laid off before this job, and it took me 8 months to apply and go through all the background checks and everything I had to do to get this job. And then 4 months later, now I'm in the same boat I was in before. I don't know how to feel. I'm kind of numb right now. Um, I went out to lunch with one of my buddies after immediately it happened, and um, you know, what can you do at this point? Aside from reach out to the news organizations, reach out to our senators, reach out to our representatives. I mean, it was an illegal firing. Um, my performance was good. I was doing everything I was supposed to be doing. I was even one of those government employees that went every day of the week. I had to report every Monday through Friday. 7 to 3:30. That was my tour duty, and that's what I served. Um, and here I am.
Did they give you any inkling as to is there a package that you're aware about that exists right now, or
Well, no, not for us. I mean, I did not take that deferred resignation, which now looking back on it, I it's kind of a regret. But who knows if that's even going to be honored in the end anyway, too. So I just feel pretty lost. I don't know where I'm going to go forward from here. I know the job market's not great right now. Um, and what occurred today across the country is not going to help the job market.
what do you make of the Trump administration's actions?
I I thought that he was. I did support him. I was a Trump supporter. Um, when he talks about government waste and all that, yes, I'm behind it. I believe there is a lot of stuff in the government that needs fixing, uh, and that's part of the reason why I actually wanted to work for the government. Actually, to help change the things that are wrong in the world. Um, and I thought that someone with like his business acumen would have come in with a fine tooth comb.
So I just last night I watched the movie The Apprentice, and um, it came out last year. It was a pretty good movie. I did some research into Roy Cohn. Um, I like this guy here. I've liked him since the movie The Big Short. He played Vinny in The Big Short. Obviously another movie that y'all should, definitely take a look at if you want to understand what happened in the housing market of 2007, 2008. But just to really get an idea of who Donald Trump is. Obviously, this is a drama movie. Obviously, there's other, documentaries on Netflix, and other places that you can obviously get a idea who Donald Trump is. I've watched a lot of the documentaries. Um, I've even read uh The Art of the Deal. Um, you know, Donald Trump is a character. So I think that he does certain business moves, but at the same time, um, I mean, y'all decide for yourself. Um, I don't. Yeah, yeah.
and actually found it instead of coming in with a wrecking ball and destroying people's lives for no reason.
Were you given a reason for the termination?
That that my performance no longer fits the mission of the IRS.
Can you say whether or not your manager, your whoever, your superiors, their their was it very just about face, or did it seem like this
Oh
was?
no, our management was scrambling to help us today. Management and union. I can't talk good about them because of where I'm at, but I mean they did everything they could to help us today, and even some of the higher up management were sympathetic and they understood where we were coming from, and I don't think they wanted us to go either. This was an executive action outside of his scope of power.
Have you been able to think about what you're going to do next in terms of dealing with this situation?
Not yet. I'm still kind of digesting it. You know, it was. I can't say it was a shock because I mean we've been going through this mental torment for 2.5 weeks now. Um, so I can't say it like I was blindsided and I'm shocked. Um, but when the hammer finally dropped, it still hurt. You know.
Well, I'm very sorry to hear what happened to you and your colleagues. Is there anything else that you would like people to know that you feel is important?
Um, Government employees do a service. It's I know we're not sometimes I know the IRS isn't the favorite people on the planet, but we fund your government. We fund your roads. We fund everything. Um, so uh, we're not there for us. It was a job, and we tried to do it.
So yeah. After the Great Depression, Franklin D. Roosevelt expanded a lot of government services. That way, it could help out with the high unemployment rate under the Great Depression or during the Great Depression. And what he also did was FDR raised taxes on the wealthy. Um, Now, I don't know about this. I mean, 75% tax is fucking crazy. But I mean, this is just how um it all happened. I mean, he did this 2 years after the height of the unemployment. Um Obviously, it paid for a lot of the New Deal programs that put a lot of people back to work. It did pay for the Social Security. The 75% is outrageous. Current business tax rate is like, I mean, shit. I mean, we have one of the lowest business tax rates in North Carolina in the country, which is at 2.5. I mean, federal 21%. That's also not including all the write-offs. I think that 50% is crazy. I think you could probably get away with 35%. Um, current uh, income tax rate at the federal level. Obviously, if I don't think that the working class should have to pay these kind of tax rates. I mean, hell, even $100,000 really is fucking dog piss, and you're pretty much paying more in tax rate than somebody who owns a business. Obviously, this is the kind of tax rate. These are the kind of tax rates that I think that businesses should be paying. And the reason why I say that is Apple, offshore tax haven. I mean, um, um, so let me see. Da, 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 da. So look, the low tax rate on most of its profits now holds as much of its non-U.S. earnings in a 252 billion mountain of cash offshores. So this is crazy. So what's kind of going on is they're paying um they're pretty much collecting. Now, this is not just Apple. I mean, I have a love and hate relationship with Apple. Um but a lot of these companies, they have offshore tax havens where they're not paying the full amount of tax. Um but if you were a worker and you moved offshores, then you will be taxed. So, like, if you're like a what's it called? Uh, uh, I forget what it's called. Um, but yeah, and
Have
obviously,
been
obviously, this has been causing a lot of
let go in
strikes
the first month of Trump's return to the
and a
White
lot of
House, leading to
protests.
protests.
This has been causing a lot of strikes and protests. Um, I know it's like an expat, but digital nomad. The word that I was thinking about is like people who are digital nomads. They have a lot of online work, and then they can go almost anywhere around the world and continue to do that work. But then, even if you're a digital nomad, you still have to kind of pay um, U.S. taxes as long as you're a U.S. citizen.
Protests across the country. Now, the White House is saying that it wants to slash 10% of the federal workforce. That is some 240,000 government jobs, all told. Now, Trump and Elon Musk, who is in charge of the so-called Department of Government Efficiency, are defending those cuts.
If the will of the president is not implemented, and the president is representative of the people, that means the will of the people is not being implemented. And that means we don't live in a democracy, we live in a bureaucracy. And so I think what we're seeing here is the thrashing of the bureaucracy as we try to restore democracy and the will of the people.
But what are you going to do when you don't have the jobs being created for this? And you're doing this at the same time that the economic foundation in this country is probably about to be rug pulled. I mean, with or without Donald Trump, even if Kamala Harris would have won, the economy was going to be rug pulled anyways. Um, and so now you're adding literally, nitrous to the fucking fire. It was already going to be napalm, but now, you done dropped, a fucking nuke in it. and then you're like, ha ha ha, let's see how big this boom goes. And so I would understand if we were at, you know, these this high job creativity, and all these jobs are being created to, to easily transition people into the work. But okay, let's say this, right? Let's say that the housing market wasn't going under. Obviously today there was a report that the housing market is contracting. So that means, and then plus, they have all these, they have a shadow inventory, DR Horton, Lennar Homes, all these guys, they bought all this land, they built all these homes, and they literally have a shadow inventory. So let's say you deport all these illegals, right? So what? A dude that worked at the IRS, tomorrow he can go frame a house. Tomorrow he can go plumb a house. Tomorrow he can go do the electrical on a house. When you have people who have been unemployed for months and years, what they're just going to pick up tomorrow and go pick, you know what I'm saying? And, go be a mechanic. I mean, a lot of what you need has to be skilled trade or skilled jobs. So it's going to be almost, I'm not saying impossible, but it's going to be extremely fucking difficult for somebody to go from an accountant job to becoming into blue collar manual labor. I mean, that is a whole nother skill set. And then what do you do when some people are making, they're on the high end income spectrum, and then they can't continue to make the payments on their homes, or they can't continue to make the payments on their cars? I mean, let's say you have been accustomed to $200,000 or $300,000. Even if you were saving 25% of that, and you were living off, let's just say 50%, you'll still need to make $150,000. Let's say you're making 300, you still need to make $150,000 to continue to make the payments, or to continue the lifestyle that you have. So, I we'll see. That's all I got. It's not looking pretty. Anything can happen, but it's not looking pretty. So
the bureaucracy goes beyond Washington, D.C. 80% of federal workers live outside of the Washington area. And joining us now is Nate Vince and Katie Sandlin. Until last week, Nate worked at Yosemite National Park. Katie worked at the National Institute of Health. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Nate, I want to start with you. As I understand it, you were like the sole locksmith for the entire Yosemite Park, right? What does that
Correct.
entail?
Yosemite has roughly 1,000 structures, historic and non-historic structures, 300 plus houses that people live in, roughly the size of Rhode Island. All of those buildings are public property and are cultural resources for the public, and are protected by locks, various locks in different forms. Day to day, I keep those locks working and keep them functioning so that the people in the park, the emergency services, utilities, facilities, interpretation division, all those people can do their job. And then day to day, I maintain the records of all those key controls and all the records for the park.
What kind of impact is this going to have on the park as like the keeper of the keys there?
Well, the previous locksmith is just retired after 24 years. I've apprenticed under him for 4 years, learning the trade and learning the specific quirks of Yosemite National Park and living out here in the woods. I've decided to commit my life here after 4 years of seasonal work and just got a permanent job. Though I was let go on Friday, just 3 weeks shy of my probationary period, which is just a trial period for new permanent employees. So in 3 weeks, I would have been a civil servant and hopefully would have, or potentially cut my job.
Hold on. So wait, so that's the 2 year probationary period, and
1 year, 1 year,
or 1 year probationary period, and yet you were learning under this apprenticeship for 4 years, right?
4, yep. They were seasonal.
It,
so with the government, I work seasonally, so it's 4 years, but 6 months seasons. And then I'm eligible to apply for a permanent job, which I wanted, and applied for. And during that probation period of fulfilling the job, I fulfilled 49 of my 52 weeks in my probation period, getting star awards and getting accolades for how happy everyone is with my service. Without me, I competed nationally for the job, beat other people out, and without me, there's a lot of knowledge that's lost. There's a lot of property that is at risk, and a lot of people that are still here in the park doing jobs will be handicapped because eventually locks will break and eventually keys will be needed.
I mean, there's so much time to go into there. Katie, I know you were let go on Saturday. I do want to ask, like, how did these firings happen? Like, what was the process? How did you find out?
I was actually treated really well compared to some of my colleagues that I heard from. My boss and boss's boss actually reached out to me because my boss was out of town, and they called me together and, gave me a heads up because they wanted to let me know, because they were pretty sure that the letter from HHS that I would get, the termination email, would probably be pretty harsh, and they wanted to give me a heads up and reassured me that nothing in that letter was true. And my boss actually cried on the phone. She said she felt so guilty recruiting me or getting me to, talking me into coming here. I just moved here from Alabama. It took on a significant amount of debt to do so, and I had only been there for a month. And then, of course, I was terminated.
So you relocated your entire life for this job?
Yes. Yes. Working at the National Institutes of Health, I mean, in my field, that's, I mean, as good as it gets, and I actually sent the recruiter an email and said, this is probably the only job on the planet that would pull me away from warm winters in the South and college football. I'd always wanted to work at the NIH, and, I actually cried on the phone when Human Resources called me and offered me the job. My team, we did so much great work, and over half of our team was cut.
Half of your team was cut. I mean, what is this going to do to your life going forward?
I wish I had an answer for you. I've actually gotten so desperate that I created a donation thing online asking people, random strangers to please help me, because normally I, plan for things like this to potentially happen, but I went all in on this job and, wiped out my savings, maxed out my credit card, took out a loan, because I thought that I never in a million years would have imagined that this would happen.
Have you thought about fighting the terminations at all?
That's something I've been considering. And up until maybe today, I was really gung-ho about that because, I want my job. Like, I'm not trying to sue somebody to get compensation. I just want to go to work and contribute to education and outreach to help teachers and their students and help healthcare providers provide better patient care. But now I think I've kind of come to the realization today that I'm not going to get my job back, but there are people that are still there. And so I want to organize folks that got fired and us fight back to get people to know what's going on there, hopefully, so that, hopefully Americans will reach out to their congressional leaders and they can stop any more people from getting terminated. I know that there's probably no hope for me, but at least there's still good people there doing incredible work, and I want to keep them there if we can.
And Nate, what did that job mean to you?
I mean, it was everything. You don't live in the woods, remote from everywhere, for nothing. You come here, people work season after season to try parks out, remote living. We don't have contact. We don't have cell service in a lot of areas. We lose a lot of contact from our friends and families, but we're devoted to the mission of the park, being a part of the park, protecting the park, and the people that come here. It creates more. When I was a kid, it was some of the most magical moments ever. And even in my whole life, they've been magical moments. And I want to be a part of that and help the people fulfill that mission, because this is our public land. And it's part of the greatest things that makes America what it is that we have these special places that people come from around the world to come. They spend their money, they spend their vacations here. And I want to be here and take care of that place for them. I put all of my eggs in this basket as well, and committed to living out here in California and in a remote location. And there's not many jobs out here. And I competed for this job. I knew that the previous guy was going to retire, and he had done 24 years of great service. And he always says, if you do a good job and you have a trade, you'll never go hungry, and you'll always have a job, especially with the government. And so I hitched my horse to this post, and I was for sure of it. I moved out here. I'm committed. And right now I'm floored and I don't have a plan. Everyone asks me what I'm going to do. I have no plan. I was planning for 20 years to be here in this park for retirement. And it's gone. It's all gone in a second. And I'm fighting because because there's people still here that are scared for their jobs. The morale is through. It's floored. I've talked to people at Carlsbad Cavern that lost 13 of their 52 people. That's over a fifth of their workforce. And these are public parks where the public comes to, needs people. They need help. They need resources. They need emergency access to facilities. They need first responders. It needs to be working well. It's like it's a city.
Yeah, I mean, I have no words other than to say that every day we have been doing stories about the numbers of jobs that have been lost. I can't thank you enough for helping.
So just to kind of give a little bit of a thing, I mean, she may have a little bit easier time to find a job. Obviously, she's probably has a higher ed degree, at least a college degree, to definitely work at the NIH. Obviously, the NIH has its own set of problems. Um, but yeah, him, I mean, it's gonna be damn near impossible to go find a job in that similar field. He may be able to become a locksmith, um, for like the public, if that's what he does, is, obviously cut keys and stuff like that. But even then, that becomes extremely difficult for the simple fact, I mean, you can go to almost any Lowe's or Walmart and have a key cut. Um, and then you're also in competition with guys who've been in that field for 10, 20 years. And so they actually have established businesses, they have vans, they have whatever to cut keys, or, you know, he's probably not used to like doing houses or programming car keys and stuff like that. So I mean, it's going to be almost impossible for him to find a similar job. So he's probably going to have to go learn a whole new trade. And so like what I'm getting at is, of course, in this life, you probably have to have one or two, maybe even three skills. Even if you have a full-time job, it's probably best to have a side hustle, a hobby that's going to make you some money, because you never know what's going to happen. But the reality is these two individuals, like, where can they actually go? I mean, if, as I was saying before, like the whole argument a couple years ago was like, oh, all these blue collar guys, when the Green New Deal comes, and it was the same argument that I was having with, same debate that I was having with certain other people. When the Green New Deal comes, you can just learn how to code. Well, all these people who've learned how to code are now, jobless. And they're also competing with, niggas from India who also know how to code. And so then, it leaves you with less and less jobs. So what are you going to go do? Work at a manufacturing plant? Um, some manufacturing is coming back, of course, but I mean, it still takes, you know, it probably takes 6 months to pull permits, get an architecture, to go in there, figure out what plot of land you're going to build the foundation. Then you got to grade it. You got to knock down all the trees. Then you got to grade it. Then you got to do the plumbing, then you got to do, you got to make sure you're running electrical. Then you got to do the foundation. Then you got to, if you're doing like an actual plant, you probably got concrete walls. Um, then you got to go in there and you got to do the roof. All this stuff. You don't just build a building tomorrow and think that you're going to be able to be employed at this new manufacturing plant. And so all this stuff kind of takes time. And I don't think that, DOGE and Trump is really plotting this out correctly. Like, you really have to provide the skill training for somebody to get into a new trade. And then what are you going to do? If you're only getting unemployment for, let's just say, if you're lucky, 6 months, then you have 6 months to not only learn a new trade, but, pray to God that trade only takes 6 months. I mean, you look at electrical, you got to be apprentice for several years. If you want to be a plumber, you got to be apprentice for several years. If you want to be a mechanic, you got to be apprentice for several years. So now you're back at the bottom of the totem pole. You're making, piss poor fucking wages because you're at the bottom of the totem pole. I know, like, as somebody who's worked in construction, I also drive trucks. I was also in social work before all of this. I know on a personal level that but if you're leaving one profession going to another profession, you now have to take the bare minimum just to learn that trade. So I mean, this kind of stuff, you have to be very, very careful. It would have been great if you know they did something with the community colleges to learn new trades. It would have been great if they had already started working on bringing back manufacturing, 4 years ago, for these buildings and these companies to come back. And it would also have been great for this to, you can't just fire everybody and then while at the same time the private sector, other companies are laying people off too. So we'll see what happens. I'm not going to sit here and call for, fucking Armageddon, but it's also not looking good. So we'll see what happens. Who knows? But y'all be good. Y'all be safe. Peace.